Storyteller by the Scottish poet Liz Lochhead first appeared in her 1984 collection, Dreaming Frankenstein. In the poem, an unnamed woman sits down at a kitchen table and begins to tell stories, entertaining the other women around her as they work. Her storytelling is rhythmic and captivating, drawing in her listeners as they stitch, grate corn, and piece together patchwork. Although she herself isn't engaged in the physical labour, no one criticises her for it. Instead, her role is valued as work in its own right. Night after night, she holds her audience in suspense, even though they know each story by heart. By morning, the tales dissolve from memory, yet linger within the minds of the children, waiting to be revived each evening. The collection Dreaming Frankenstein marked an important point in Lochhead's career, establishing her reputation for blending myth, literary references, and everyday life. The poems in the collection explore themes of storytelling, identity, and relationships, especially those seen from a woman's point of view, as well as the power of narrative in shaping human experience. Lochhead often emphasises the role of storytelling as a vital, communal and cultural act, describing it as a way to connect people and preserve experiences. She has also explained that she sees stories as a means to give a voice to those who are often unheard, capturing the everyday lives of women, communities and ordinary people whose experiences might otherwise be overlooked. The poem comprises 4 stanzas of 5, 6, 9 and 10 lines respectively. It is written in free verse, which means that it has neither a fixed metrical or rhythmic structure nor a set rhyme scheme. Lochhead instead creates cohesion, rhythm and musicality through extensive use of enjambment, which is where the meaning of one poetic line spills over into the next without any punctuation to create a pause. This rhythmic technique is used to masterfully evoke not only the continuous cycle of work and sleep, but also the skill and fluidity with which the storyteller tells her tales, and the harmony between the spoken word and the quiet, repetitive labour of the women. The enjambment mirrors the way the storyteller's words flow seamlessly from one moment to the next, just as the tasks around the table continue without interruption. It highlights the unbroken nature of both the work and the storytelling, suggesting that the two are intertwined in a continuous rhythm that sustains the community. Lochhead also makes use of repetition techniques such as anaphora, e.g., as the women stirred themselves to build the fire, as the peasants' feet felt for clogs, as thin grey washed over flat fields, and quasi-anaphora, where there is a repetition of prepositions at the beginning of each poetic line, i.e., at the scoured table, in the swept kitchen, beside the dresser with the cracked delft, and sound patterning techniques such as alliteration, e.g. 5 or 40 fingers stitched, and sibilance, e.g. never the one to slander her shiftless. Lochhead also employs anastrophe in places, which is where the normal word order in a sentence is inverted, not only to place emphasis on particular ideas or images, e.g. to tell the stories was her work, but also to give the poem a formal, somewhat archaic feel. The slightly old-fashioned tone allows Lochhead to evoke a sense of tradition, emphasising the continuity of storytelling and manual work across generations. By distancing us from modern times, she invites us into a more universal, enduring way of life, where storytelling and the oral tradition was central to community and identity. The poem is rich with figurative language, such as metaphor, e.g., and every last crumb of daylight was salted away, and simile, e.g., it was like spinning. The words delft, clogs, and flat fields could be considered to form a semantic field related to traditional Dutch culture. The word delft refers to Delftware, the famous blue and white pottery from the Netherlands, often associated with Dutch craftsmanship and daily life. Clogs are a type of traditional wooden footwear commonly worn in the Netherlands, further reinforcing the cultural setting. And the phrase flat fields evokes the well-known geography of the Netherlands, with its characteristic flat terrain and expansive farmlands. Together, these words create a cohesive image of rural Dutch life, underscoring themes of tradition, manual labour, and a rural landscape which all link to the Netherlands. The title Storyteller places this unnamed woman at the heart of the poem, emphasising her crucial role in maintaining the fabric of the community. She is the glue that holds everything together. Through her storytelling, she unites the other women and children, providing a rhythm and continuity to their lives. Her words transcend mere entertainment. They serve as a kind of ritual or anchor that connects the daily work with something deeper, almost sacred. By focusing on her as the storyteller, the title underscores her power to weave connections, memories, and shared experience within the community. The poem begins, "She sat down at the scoured table in the swept kitchen beside the dresser with its cracked delft." Note the way the eponymous storyteller is introduced merely with a lowercase pronoun she. This punctuation and vocabulary choice suggests that Lochhead wishes us to see this woman perhaps as representing a role or a function, rather than as being defined by her individual characteristics. It could also suggest that we have merely interrupted a scene that has continuously played out over generations. This may be the beginning of the poem, but it isn't the beginning of the story. The storytelling tradition, the work, and the rhythm of the daily cycle have been in place long before this scene and will continue long after. This absence of a defined starting point underscores the continuity of the roles the storyteller and the community play, with the poem presenting a moment in time rather than an origin story. The adjective scoured suggests that the table has been very thoroughly scrubbed and cleaned, while the kitchen floor has been swept to remove any dust and dirt. The delftware has been put back on display on the dresser, even though it is cracked. All of this suggests that even though these people are of humble origins, they nevertheless take pride in the cleanliness and orderliness of their homes. The enjambment that governs the transition of these 4 lines creates a visual separation between the individual components of the image, which forces the reader to focus on each in isolation before moving on to the next. Not only does this help to create a vivid sense of this domestic setting, but also emphasises the women's care and attention to detail. Note the quasi-anaphoric quality of the repeated prepositions at the beginning of lines 2, 3, and 4, at, in, and beside. Although this is not true anaphora, which requires a repetition of a particular word or phrase, this consistent use of prepositions at the start of each line mimics anaphora by establishing a rhythmic pattern and focus on place as the reader's attention is concentrated on the details of the setting. The stanza ends, and every last crumb of daylight was salted away. This metaphor works on a number of levels. Not only have all the literal crumbs of bread been swept up off the floor and disposed of, but also every last trace of daylight has been collected and put to good use. The verb to salt away means to discreetly put something away to save it, and is usually used in reference to money. This vocabulary choice suggests that daylight is a commodity that is just as valuable as money and is therefore not to be wasted. The women work outdoors or work indoors without candlelight until they can see no more. We might be forgiven for thinking that the woman has sat down at the table for a rest after a hard day's work, but we are quickly disabused of this notion as we learn that no one could say the stories were useless, for as the tongue clacked, 5 or 40 fingers stitched, corn was grated from the husk, patchwork was pieced, or the darning done. The woman is not alone. As she tells stories, the other women, either in the family or the community, sit around the table doing chores, such as sewing, mending, and preparing gathered crops for consumption or storage. Lochhead uses 2 examples of synecdoche here, which is where a part of something is used to represent the whole. The storyteller is represented by her tongue, which clacked, while the other women are represented by their fingers, which carry out the other tasks. By using these body parts to represent actions, Lochhead emphasises the collective nature of the work being done. The women are seen more as a group performing tasks for the collective good than as individuals with unique identities. Their actions, rather than their personalities or stories, take centre stage. In this way, the storyteller's role is significant because she is the only one who remains separate from this functional description, positioning her as the unifier within the community. Furthermore, the nature of the women's tasks reveal that their existence is one of subsistence. There is no such thing as leisure, for one thing. The work they do during the daylight hours is merely replaced by work that can be done inside. Crops that are gathered during the day are prepared either for consumption or storage during the evening. Additionally, their other tasks suggest the need to make the most of the meagre resources that they have. Patchwork, presumably for bed coverings, is made from repurposed clothes that have been worn out, and those clothes that still have some life in them are darned or mended. Note the plosive alliteration of patchwork and pieced, and darning and done. Not only do these repeated, forceful consonant sounds perhaps mirror the physicality and rhythm of the work itself, which requires focus and precision, but it also possibly reflects the ongoing nature of the labour in the community. The tasks, as well as the sounds, may be repetitive, but they are also vital to the functioning of the household or community. The onomatopoeic clacked to describe the sound of the storyteller's tongue evokes the sound of a metronome, which is an instrument used to keep a musician in time with the beat. The storyteller, therefore, functions like a pace setter, as her rhythmic storytelling sets a steady, captivating cadence that keeps the other women focused and working in sync as they stitch, grate, and piece together patchwork. Just as a pace setter in a factory or team setting establishes a rhythm that supports consistent, productive work, her storytelling creates a communal rhythm that keeps everyone engaged and productive. This shared cadence highlights the importance of her role, as her voice becomes an essential part of the work, blending creativity with the practical tasks of daily life. Note how the entire stanza is enjambed. In the same way that the women don't permit themselves to pause in their labour, the reader is not permitted to pause in their reading. Even though the other women are working their fingers to the bone while the storyteller merely talks, surprisingly, she is not seen as a shirker. Never the one to slander her shiftless. The verb to slander means to make false and damaging statements about someone, and the adjective shiftless typically means lazy or lacking effort. In other words, no one ever falsely accuses her of not pulling her weight. In fact, she is regarded as being above the normal rules. Remember the first stanza, which communicates to us in no uncertain terms that cleanliness, thriftiness, and hard work are prized in this culture. Her ability to clean and to cook, however, is neither here nor there, and she is not judged according to these standards. Daily sloven or spotless, no matter whether dishwater or tasty was her soup. A sloven is a person who is habitually untidy or careless, and the adjectival noun dishwater to describe the soup suggests something that is lacking in flavour. This is all irrelevant because to tell the stories was her work. The introduction of a short sentence here, breaking the previous pattern of longer sentences and enjambment, brings the reader sharply to a halt, to decisively assert the importance of her role. Note also the use of anastrophe. In normal syntax, the sentence would read, "Her work was to tell stories." By placing the word work on the end of the line and at the end of the sentence gives it prominence. The women are not just excusing her for sitting around and doing nothing. Her role is seen as vital and integral to the part of the community, and is just as valuable, even if it may not be as physically taxing. Indeed, it was like spinning, gathering thin air to the singlest, strongest thread. This simile is a very fitting one for the poem's domestic setting, and reinforces the idea that the storyteller's role is an essential part of the community's work. Spinning, like the other tasks described in the poem, such as patchwork and darning, is traditionally a domestic activity. By likening her storytelling to spinning, Lochhead suggests that the storyteller is weaving something vital out of the intangible, i.e. stories, just as spinning turns raw fibres into something tangible and functional. This simile also emphasises the delicate nature of her task. The combination of the images of thin air and strongest thread captures the tension between the fleeting nature of words and the way they become something enduring and meaningful when spun together by the storyteller. In this sense, she contributes just as much as the women who are physically working. Her words bind the community together in a way that is just as significant. The women look forward to this nightly ritual of storytelling, even though it is the same story every day. Night in, she'd have us waiting, held breath for the ending we knew by heart. Lochhead skillfully uses enjambment here to mirror the women's eager anticipation as the reader is left hanging on the ends of the poetic lines. The way the storyteller is able to keep the women engaged in a story they already know backwards is not only a testament to her skill, but also an indication of the importance that this shared activity has for them. Note how this third stanza is rich with sibilants, the repetition of s and sh sounds contributing to the rhythm and overall atmosphere of the poem. The softness of these consonants creates a smooth, flowing sound that mirrors the casual, almost conversational tone of the storytelling. It also creates a sense of quietness, which contrasts with the more energetic, dynamic imagery in other parts of the poem, reinforcing the sense of the storyteller's voice as soothing and constant, able to command attention without force. There's no such thing as a lie-in for these women, and at first light as the women stirred themselves to build the fire, as the peasants' feet felt for clogs, as thin grey washed over flat fields. As soon as there is enough light to see, the women are up and about doing domestic chores. This picture of relentless drudgery is enhanced by the anaphora at the beginning of the second, third and fourth lines of the stanza, as the women build the fire and the peasants' feet felt for clogs, as they did yesterday and so will tomorrow. The way that thin grey washed over flat fields suggests the delicate, subtle effect of a watercolourist adding a tint to a painting, and evokes a sense of monotony, dullness and lifelessness, reflecting the starkness of the morning after the storyteller's magical influence has faded. Indeed, the stories have dissolved in the whirl of the ear, suggesting that the vibrant, captivating world created by the storyteller's words is now, for the women at least, replaced by the bleak, routine nature of everyday hard graft. The stories, however, remain in the sleeping heads of the children. The way that they hung upside down till they flew again in the storyteller's night suggests that they are nocturnal creatures, like bats, who remain asleep during the day. This metaphor emphasises that the stories are alive and vibrant during the night, when the storyteller's magic can bring them to life. The children, though they are unaware of it during the day, are still shaped and influenced by these stories which linger in their minds, waiting to resurface in the quiet of the evening. In conclusion, Storyteller portrays the delicate balance between the vivid creativity of storytelling and the drudgery of everyday life. The storyteller, while seemingly passive, infuses the mundane with meaning, linking the community through the shared act of listening. Ultimately, the poem celebrates the enduring power of stories, how they shape the community even in their absence, continuing to resonate and take flight in the minds of those who hear them. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques, and English literature texts.